All right, welcome to another episode of Math on the Rocks. Just as an always, we got to always remember to remind people to subscribe either on, let's see, Apple or Spotify or YouTube. We've got video versions, we've got audio versions. But we're doing a special introduction. Why are we doing a special introduction, Cole?
Oh, I was just going to say, be careful there, Duane. People are going to start thinking we're official with all those titles you're throwing out there. But no, this is kind of like the pre-cap recording for our CMC Math on the Rocks Live that we just did at CMC South a few weeks ago. So super excited.
Yeah, and so, people need to know that what you're going to hear is our first try at trying to be professional on the road. And true to form, it was a little rocky, but we had a blast. So welcome to this episode of one of our guests from CMC South.
All right, welcome to another episode of Math on the Rocks, here coming live from Palm Springs. I'm still Duane, and Cole?
And Cole?
Oops, except I gave you the answer. I'm sorry. And you are?
The president-elect of the Central Section, and I work for the Kern County Superintendent Schools Office.
Way to go. And I'm CMC Central President, and I work for Merced County Office of Education. Cole, go. Why are we here?
So we are here recording live. So anybody out there in the exhibitor area want to come join us, we are here and joined by Dr. Pam Seda. Super excited to have you join us today. Why don't we start by just a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. I'm so excited first to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I am a retired math educator that lives in the Atlanta, Georgia area. I am the founder and CEO of Seda Educational Consulting and the co-author of Choosing the C, Framework for Equity in the Math Classroom.
Oh, very good. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining
right
us.
now, we just got to stop and say, everybody, I want to hear a collective, that's awesome.
That's
awesome.
Do you all know about the Choosing to C book? Yeah. If you don't, we got some no's. So we got some work to do, Pam. Read the book. You will be happy.
In about 10 minutes, they'll be convinced, I promise.
Yes.
So we are here, and we really want to unpack, and I know a lot of your work with the ICUCARE Framework is really talking about developing this equity-centered classroom. So whenever, just for those that may be less familiar with that, whenever you think about inequity, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
I think it means focusing on the needs of our students and less about us and more about what do our kids need and what do we as the adults need to do to give our kids what they need.
And what do you think is, because you're working with schools probably all over the country at this point, right, right after your book, what are you seeing as like some of the greatest barriers to allowing that to happen?
I think the greatest barrier is still that it's hard to teach in ways that you've never experienced yourself. So I still see a lot of teachers engaging, doing most of the work in the class. And while they may know that they should be doing something different, they've never experienced anything different. So just to tell teachers to stop doing this and do this instead is not sufficient.
And so what does that look like? How do we get them over that hump?
I just think we have to create professional learning experiences where they experience the type of learning environments that we expect for them to create for their students.
Yeah. Can you help us unpack a little bit? What is the ICUCARE Framework? What does that stand for?
So it represents the 7 principles of my equity framework. So the I is include others as experts. The first C is be critically conscious. You understand your students well. The second C is use culturally relevant curricula. A, assess, activate, build on prior knowledge. R, release control. And E, expect more.
Expect more. I love that E, expect more, right? And as you're talking, it reminded me of what the acronym stands for. I'm thinking about how closely that ties to three core principles, Duane, in the new math framework. What is the three dimensions?
What? I didn't hear you. What?
The 3 dimensions in the new framework?
Assets-based instruction, active engagement through investigation and exploration, and cultural and personal relevance, which is ICUCARE
Exactly.
addresses all of
that's
that.
embedded.
Yeah.
in the framework. Yes.
And so that's just wonderful. So the work that you have been doing actually gives us a framework maybe to like how do we implement and roll out some of these bigger ideas that maybe there wasn't all the guidance we needed in the new framework. But I think that the work that you've been doing actually helps put a little more feet on the ground. How do we make this happen in that work?
And yeah, that was really one of the goals behind why we wrote the book. I know when I first envisioned it, I was like, one is, I know a lot of people are really committed to equity, but they don't recognize inequity when they see it. That's one. And two, a lot of this work has been very theoretical. And so I wanted teachers to be able to see very specific, practical things that you can do, but they're embedded or they're embedded in the framework so that the framework gives them ideas of where they can start, but also guides future strategy. So if they see a new strategy, they can now think about, oh, that's including others as experts. Here's some other ways that I can do this.
Right. So giving them that model, something they can play off and replicate. Yeah, that's great. Whenever you think, so the C with the culturally relevant, because we get this question a lot, and there's I know that there's multiple phases of how we might adapt tasks to fit into this box. Can you kind of talk us through those phases a little
The
bit?
different stages of tasks.
There you go. I say
Yes,
phases, stages.
I call them
yeah.
stages, yeah. Because I understand teachers are learners, and I know when I saw a lot of the social justice tasks or the culturally relevant tasks that really empowered students, they were really kind of overwhelming to me, right? And I was like, oh, I don't feel like I can just create those. So just like we don't take kids from kindergarten to calculus, I came up with a continuum of culturally relevant tasks. And so I say, start off with a stage 1 task, which is something that's cognitively demanding. If it's not cognitively demanding, there's no reason even to adapt it. And then I say a stage 2 task is what I call a baby step, but just change the names to ones that are meaningful to your students. Put your students' names in there, put your principals' names in there, put restaurants, grocery stores, just names that mean something to your students. That's a baby step, but that's a place to start. Once teachers are comfortable doing that, then I say, okay, now replace the context to one that is engaging to your students. And then lastly, a stage 4 task is, all right, now how do we empower our students to be agents of change? And once you've kind of gotten comfortable with those stage 2 and stage 3, then it's a lot easier to engage in a stage 4 task.
Very good. Awesome. Yeah.
All right, so just a reminder to the audience, the conceit is you're supposed to be skeptical, all right? And we are working with next door neighbors, skeptics. And so I would like you to kind of get your feet in their shoes and ask a question your skeptical neighbor might ask, so that we can then be equipped with Pam's awesome answer when we return. All right? Do you have a question to give them time to think?
So a question that it's whenever we start doing any work with equity and really trying to bring students to the center, we're always met with opposition, right? And I've, especially now coming off of an election, right, where things are hyperbolic, is that the right word? Where we're a little bit on either side there. What do you say to those that say that math is just the numbers and just go do the math like we've done, for the last 50 years and stop worrying about this equity thing in math class? Like, how do you respond, to a teacher or a group of teachers in that sense?
So the first response I have is that we have a wealth of research that says that we are not meeting the needs of the majority of our students. Not just, we may get maybe 80% of our students to pass a class, but we have the majority of our students deciding that math is not for them, they don't want to ever take math again, or I have seen where they don't recognize math in real life because school math is so disjointed from the math that they actually use in real life. So I can't say by any means that we've ever done this math education thing successfully in our country, if we just look at that. Secondly, I feel like in this day, because everything is overly politicized, there are people who would choose to misrepresent what it means to do social justice tasks, what it means to do equity. So I always have my own definition so that people are clear as to what I mean by equity. And I say it's simply every student gets what they need to be successful. Now, there are others who think that equity is about taking from the smart kids and giving to the not smart kids. And that whole idea that we have kids that we label as smart and labeled of not smart is problematic within itself. But my definition says we give every kid what they need to be successful. But we also know that that's different. Every kid doesn't need the same thing. And so we've been giving kids all the same thing, thinking that we're doing right by children, knowing that any parent who has more than one kid knows that every child needs something different.
Yes.
Spot on.
Amen to that. Yes, I've got 3 at home, and I can tell you they are all different.
So I love Sarah because Sarah makes my job easy. She's like, I'll be a skeptic. There you go.
I have 35 kids in front of me. How do I make it so that 35 different kids have exactly what they need and still, I don't know, sleep, talk to my family, do anything else other than think about teaching?
Great question. So the first thing is we have to let go of this idea that you as the teacher are going to meet the individual needs of every kid. It's just not going to, it's never happened. And we need to stop pretending that we are the person to do that. So in order to make that shift, we have to think about, instead of our class being a collection of individuals, we have to think about our class being a community of learners. And when you shift to a community of learners, you realize that you are one of the members of that community, but every student is not only responsible for their own individual learning, but they're also responsible for contributing to the learning of others. And so when you have a community of learners, a lot of the learning happens in spite of us. And so our job goes from thinking that somehow we can open kids' heads and pour knowledge into that and control the learning, which we can't, unless we're mind readers. Last I checked, learning takes place inside your heads. Instead of thinking that we can do that, what we become is the curator of learning experiences. That's what we can control. We can control the learning environment. We can control the experiences that kids have so that they can make sense of the mathematics and then learn.
Beautiful. Oh, way to go, Anthony.
So I want to circle back around to the cultural relevant tasks. I think, well, personally, I think they're great, but like I can see some issues. Personally, sometimes I feel a little bit weird trying to connect to a culture that I'm not a part of. For example, I have a bunch of Armenian students, and I'm Hispanic myself, so there's like a disconnect there. So I'm not sure, what exactly goes into their task. So how would I go about connecting to something that they know besides their, the life around school? And if I somehow overstep or, a student takes something wrong, how do you go around, going around, that issue, because, we don't mean any harm sometimes, but, sometimes, I'll perceive something different than a student will, and, if they get upset, like, how do we handle that?
Yes, great question. I appreciate that. So firstly, teachers are learners, and you have to learn to teach, and you're going to make mistakes. So you just have to get used to the fact that you're not going to be perfect. I can't tell you how many times I've offended kids and taught stuff wrong, and I had to learn from it. So this idea that somehow we're supposed to be perfect is just not a realistic expectation for teachers, which is why we're losing them at these incredible rates. So that's the first thing. Second is we have to, as I said, we are learners too, so we have to take the time to learn about our students. And that's one of the definitions I give for critically conscious, that first C in my framework, is we have to take the time to understand how stereotypes impact our students and understand our students well. So if you don't know your Armenian students very well, you just have to ask them. You have to have some conversations with them. I, at the beginning of the year, would oftentimes do a student interest survey and ask them, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? So as long as my students are my guide, that's usually a safe place to be. And then the second way to do that is sometimes I've seen teachers give open-ended tasks. Like I remember one time they were doing something with area, and the teacher allowed the students to create their own sports arena. They said, whatever sport you're interested in, you're going to draw a rectangular figure of the sports arena that you're interested in, whether it's a soccer field or whether it's football or whatever. And so the problem was open-ended enough that the kids could put their own cultures and their own interests into it. So those are both ways. One is you can find out more information from your kids so that you can put the information in, or you can make the task open-ended enough so that they can put their interests in.
That makes me happy hearing you say that, because I can't be the purveyor of all cultural and personal relevance for all of my 42 different cultures in my school district. But I can create the space for them to bring in their culture and share their culture. I'm thinking of the math language routine, co-craft a question, where we are allowing space for the students to engage in the crafting of the question that they're going to be working on in the first place. What a nice place for them to introduce things to me. If my job is to get to know them,
Absolutely.
co-crafting a question is deliberately creating the space for them to do that.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it just has to do when they know that you want to give them that space, students respond to that, right? We may be messing up. We may make a mistake, but students really appreciate when you make that effort to learn about their culture and learn about who they are outside the classroom.
Yeah. Do we have any other skeptical questions? Skeptics? Oh, Kyle's always skeptical. Here.
So I hear what you're saying. Back at my school site, I have some teachers that say, I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this work. It's not in my curriculum. I don't know what to do. And so what are maybe some promising practices that I might be able to take back to them on how to begin some of this work?
Well, the stages are really, and I've done lots of workshops where I've shown teachers how to do exactly that. Like, start off with your textbook and make sure that you're selecting a problem that's cognitively demanding. That's where you start, right? And I know a lot of teachers who intuitively do this. They replace the names with their students' names. I used to do that on purpose during a test because it would reduce the anxiety. And the way I know that it worked was when I would see them smiling during a test, and because they're looking at their classmates, seeing their names in the problem. Like little things like that, that's very easy to do. That's a baby step. And then I show them, I've done workshops where I actually show them how I take the task. Here's a task that I got from Student Achievement Partners. And here's what it looks like as a stage 2 task. And here's what it looks like as a stage 3 task. And here's what it looks like as a stage 4 task. That same problem. So I show them step by step so that they can, and then give them the opportunity, then I give them another task and give them the opportunity collaboratively to adapt that. Now, I taught high school, and I don't know about the rest of you, but when I started trying to change numbers, I would always end up with something funky. So I would say, change the context, right? Maybe add some questions, because especially the more complex the math gets, it's more difficult necessarily to change the mathematics per se. I do notice that sometimes teachers have a challenge recognizing when something is cognitively demanding, or they may just have all this stuff that's low level. So sometimes I've even helped teachers with that level 1 task. I say, well, start with the answer and have them create the question. Like if you have this regular problem and you know what the answer is, just reverse it and say, so-and-so was dealing when this was the answer. What could have been the problem? That's a way to make it cognitively demanding.
Awesome, yeah.
I'm gonna.
You're getting some nods from the audience. Yeah.
They don't look like skeptics to me.
I know, they kind of forgot their job, but that's okay. We'll survive.
You convinced us.
So you had mentioned just a little bit ago about we've been doing the same thing over and over and we've been getting the same results. And I'm reminded the California State assessments just came out again with the results where 1 in 3 kids in California are meeting math standards. But for our Black and African American population, it's almost 1 in 10 in California. and it's about 24% for our Hispanic Latino population, right? And as I think about that data, even the 1 in 3 overall tells me that something isn't working for all kids, right? And even more so for some of our student groups. Leaders are talking about it. I've heard more buzz, in the last 18 months than I've heard in a long time about we really have to lean into this work. What would you recommend, like how, if I was a leader and I had teachers maybe that were a little skeptical, what would be your advice to them about like where do you begin the journey as a leader to get this work going?
Well, it's interesting because I'm presenting on that tomorrow.
Okay, look at that. So go to her session tomorrow.
So I talk about there are 4 things that are needed at the leadership level. So the first thing is you need to establish a shared vision of what effective, equitable math instruction is. All right, we can't just tell people. I know every school and district I've worked in had that vision and mission statement, and it was in a program book somewhere, and that was it. All right, we have to create that shared vision. It has to be something that we all understand. And I remember when I was a math supervisor, I would go into classrooms and I'm seeing teachers stand and deliver. And they're doing what they think is expected of them. And I had to realize I have to own that. If they're doing what they think they're supposed to be doing and it's not what I want them to do, I haven't been very clear. And I have to own that. And I think as leaders, we have to own that. So we have to get a shared vision for everyone, not just teachers. We got to give them all, but who's ever evaluating, district office, community, like we all have to be on the same page. That's number 1. 2, I kind of alluded to it. We have to provide teachers professional learning experiences consistently, regularly, where they experience the type of learning environments that we ask them to create for their students. I forgot the third one. We'll come back to that in a minute. 4th one is we need to create, I'm sorry. The third one has to do with observation tools. We need observation tools that when we go into the classroom that are aligned to the standards for mathematical practice. And I believe the ICUCARE Equity Framework. If that's not the framework you use, then whatever equity framework that you're committed to, that the observation tools have to align to that. Because the old saying is, people do not what's expected, but what's inspected. So we need to make sure our observation tools align so that they understand that this is what's important, right? And then the last one is we need communities that support our students as critical thinkers and problem solvers. And that just means we have to do work in the community. Our students are brilliant. They do engage in critical thinking and problem solving outside of our math classes all the time. You pass a rule that they don't like. They're going to engage in all kinds of critical thinking and reasoning to get around that rule, right? So if they can, because they have opportunities to express that brilliance outside the classroom, we have to find ways to allow them to express that brilliance and allow our community members to have that same expectation that our kids can show that brilliance.
Yeah, you hit on a number of things in that, and the one, I saw Kyle over here saying, I've yet to see a school vision statement that says, yes, we're going to do this for all kids except those kids, right? None of our vision statements say that, right? We're all claiming that we're doing for all, but are we really approaching it for all kids? And something else that you said that I'm really resonating with too is you said about monitoring tools, but then also are the evaluation tools that we're using for our teacher evaluations aligned to make sure that we are expecting that. And that is one way also to hold teachers accountable to following through to some, right? You give them the training, but then making sure on the back end that they're actually following that guide to you, right? Very good. Well, Pam, we have just a couple more minutes. Is there any closing thoughts, anything, party messages you want to send our group away with?
Yeah, I love speaking about this work. I love, I had the book. I speak all the time, but the real work that I want to do is what you were talking about. Work with leaders to create those shared visions, to provide those professional learning experiences, to help co-craft those observation tools and to work with the community. So that's the work that I do. I want to do more of that. So please invite me, Pam Seda at sedaeducationalconsulting.com.
Yes, we will. And what time is your session tomorrow?
It's at 1:15.
So 1:15. So if you want some more of this and how to work on the leader side, go see Pam tomorrow at 1:15. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. A great conversation, and we'll be following up. Yeah.
All right, everybody join me in thanking Pam right now. Woo-hoo! Thank you very much.